pray that Allah may accept your prayers and all your good deeds, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. What that means is that if there is anything praiseworthy in my khutbah attributed to God and to this wonderful place where we have gathered, and if there is anything objectionable or wrong in my khutbah, please do not attribute it to this house of worship, to its administration, or to the community. The fault falls upon me and me alone. And the same goes for my brother Sarim's recitation, but I can guarantee that my brother's recitation will outshine the humble words that follow. Jazakallah khair. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad al-Mustafa Khatam al-Nabiyyin ورحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وعلى أصحابه الطيبين الراشدين وعلى كل الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أولياء الله المقربين وبعد. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the ever gracious and the all merciful. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and all praise be to God, who is the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of all realities. Al-Haq, God is truth. And because Allah is Akbar, God is beyond all thought and all imagining, that means that Allah, the truth, is similarly transcendent, above all of our thinking and understanding. As-Salam, God is peace. Al-Mu'ati, God is the one who gives. Al-Mani', God is the one who withholds. Al-Muhyi, God is the one who gives life. Al-Mumit, God is the one who gives death. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, I bear witness there is no God but the one. And in the light of God's knowledge, I seek refuge from my own ignorance and foolishness. In the light of God's forgiveness, I seek refuge from all of my transgressions, all of those things that I've done, and all of those things that I've failed to do. In every season of my life, I offer God praise as is due. May God's prayers and God's blessings be upon our Prophet Muhammad al-Mustafa, God's chosen and God's beloved, Khatam al-Nabiyyin, the one who came to seal and to verify what all of the prophets have taught. And the one who was sent, as the Quran says, as nothing but a mercy, not just to the Muslims or to the people who deserve, but to all the worlds. May God's prayers and God's blessings be upon him. May God's blessings be upon his family, who suffered so much for the cause of justice, the cause of truth. May God's prayers and blessings be upon all of his righteous companions, who similarly sacrificed with their livelihoods and their lives for the cause of truth and justice. May God's blessings and prayers be upon all of the prophets, upon all of the messengers, upon all of their true companions, and upon their communities. May God's blessings be upon the awliya, God's friends, those women and men who stand for justice, who stand for the oppressed, who stand for truth in this and in every generation. May God's blessings be upon them. Today it is my great privilege to follow the Quranic command where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Zumar, or actually this quote is from Surah Al-An'am, the 6th surah. When those who believe in our signs come to you, say, peace be upon you, salamun alaykum. Your Lord has written mercy as a law upon himself. So if anyone has ignorantly committed evil and then has repented and reformed, verily God is forgiving and God is merciful. This passage from the Quran is so salient and so important because it is not our achievement today that we celebrate at the close of the holy month of Ramadan. It is God's mercy. It is God's mercy, God's forgiveness, God's goodness. And so we return to this place of praise and we say fond farewell to the month of Ramadan, this month of rahmah, this month of mercy, this month of light. We give thanks to God for this month of spiritual intensity, this month of charity and prayer, this month of fasting on many levels and in many forms. Fasting from food and drink, fasting from our destructive habits, fasting from our unconscious consumption and excessive lifestyles, and fasting for real transformation and for the renewed desire to live a godly and spiritually infused life. Understanding that we do not celebrate our achievement today, but rather God's mercy, we give thanks today for this returning, this Eid. We give thanks for this month-long opportunity to confront our own faults and failings and limitations, this chance to rediscover our inadequacy and spiritual poverty before God, this opportunity to seek forgiveness and to dispense forgiveness freely and generously to others. As I say my fond farewell to the month of Ramadan. And yet, before I get too settled back into the patterns of a normal life, I have to say that I'm still hungry. I look at myself, my community, my society, and my world, and I cannot declare that the fast is completely over. I am still starving and struggling for a right relationship with God, for a truly balanced relationship with the creation, for which I was created to be a steward, a caretaker, and not just a taker. I am still hungry and thirsty for a justice that is universal, and so recognizes and protects the dignity of every life, no matter how different from my own. I still hunger for the transformation of my world, which is weeping and wailing in agony. I still thirst for the emancipation of all oppressed people, be they the victims of political and economic oppression, or the victims of racism, sexism, religious prejudice, malicious misrepresentation, and hateful demonization. Just by way of illustration, I remind myself and you of a few examples that show us just how far we still have to go before we can rest. I recall the suffering and displaced and bereaved and brutally murdered souls of Syria. I remember the Tibetan people. I am just learning about the Rohingya Muslims in Burma, to whom Sister Samira made reference, who have suffered for decades and are currently the targets of brutal ethnic and governmental oppression. I think of the Shia majority in Bahrain, who live under a privileged minority Sunni rule. I think of the insecure and sometimes terrorized Jewish and Christian minorities in many so-called Muslim countries, including the Christians whose churches have been bombed in Nigeria and Kenya. I do not forget the Palestinians of Gaza and the West Bank. Closer to home, I have come to know a little about the experience of our sisters and brothers of African descent, who long ago knew all about the evils of discrimination and racial profiling here in North America. I have witnessed the experience of our sisters, young and old, who continue to be put down and treated as second-class citizens in nearly every religious community, nearly every culture and society, and who continue to be victimized by the private and soul-stealing horrors of domestic violence. I have listened deeply and prayerfully to the pain of our brothers and sisters, our sons and our daughters, who have courageously come to the discovery that God made them lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgendered, even though they knew that this would mean a life of suffering, discrimination, hatred, judgment, and exclusion, especially in their faith communities. The list is endless. Ramadan is over, but I still hunger to see the concept of family or tribal honor stripped away from murder and all forms of violence. I continue to thirst for an end to all forms of ethnic and religious supremacism. Ethnic supremacism, religious supremacism, socioeconomic supremacism, and the violence they all inherently promote. I am hungry to overcome the corporate and individual greed that forces so many millions to starve and completely disregards human, animal, and environmental costs. I starve to erase the term collateral damage from every language spoken on planet Earth. I remain hungry for revolution, but not the kind that trades one form of tyranny for another, nor the kind where all sides are guilty of war crimes, even when one side is committing less than the other. Rather, the revolution for which I hunger and thirst is spiritual, where knowledge and understanding triumph over ignorance and prejudice, where faith in God's sovereignty and mercy triumphs over all forms of fear, intimidation, and coercion, including the fear and intimidation and coercion that is sometimes hurled from the minbar. I hunger for a revolution that awakens us all to the fact that religious diversity is a gift from God, and the religious law each of us has been given was created and given to serve humankind and to facilitate the restoration of each and every human being to the best of all possible forms, rather than humankind being created to serve the law and nothing higher. I hunger and thirst for a revolution of consciousness, but I recognize that this revolution will not come quickly or easily, and certainly not as the result of physical force or high-tech weaponry. Rather, it will come from the ground up, from a radical rediscovery of our faith and the essence of all divinely revealed religion.